Good afternoon, councillors, those that are here in attendance and those who are tuning in from elsewhere. So as we gather here on the unceded lands of the Palawa people, I officially open this meeting today here at Town Hall at 1 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. No speakers at all. Okay. Just noting that in the room at the moment we do have some later arrivals from Councillor Walker and Councillor Pentridge, but we will continue on through with no other attendance and apologies. Pass it over here if you like. Okay. Moving forward to agenda item number 2, there are no mayoral acknowledgements for today. Agenda item number 3 with declarations of interest. So a councillor must declare any interest that a councillor has in a matter before any matter is discussed on that issue, before it commences. Councillor Walker, Councillor Pentridge. Must ask now, do we have any declarations of interest for today's agenda? There being none, we'll move forward to the confirmation of minutes at item 4. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the City of Launceston Council held on the 25th of January be confirmed as true and correct record. Somebody to move? Councillor Britton. A seconder, Councillor Gibson. All those in favour? That is 11 of the councillors in favour. Those against? Those against or abstaining? Against? Councillor Pentridge. Okay. The motion is carried. Moving through to agenda item number 5, which is council workshops. 5.1, which is the recommendation that council notes the council workshops conducted and attended since the last council meeting for these purposes described. The QVMag 2024 exhibition schedule, Enterprise Works at Macquarie House, Informe ABCDE Learning Site Final Report, Customer Service Charter, UTAS Stadium Redevelopment, Stadiums Tasmania discussion. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Palmer, a seconder. Councillor Kai. Councillor Palmer, would you like to speak to any of the items? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make comment on the incredible work of Sarah McCormack. She did an amazing presentation for us at workshop, and everyone, or a lot of people, spoke about it on the day, but I would just like to concur with all those comments. And really it comes down to 2 words in my mind. It's community connection, and Sarah has that in bucket loads. The work that she does through the program really resonates through the community, and I really do believe it's outstanding work, and I thank her very much.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Kai is the seconder. Would you like to speak to any of the workshops? Any other comments from around the table? Councillor Palmer to close. Anything further? Okay, there being none, we'll put it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item number 6, we have no councillors' leave of absence applications identified as a part of this agenda. We don't have also any community reports today, so we'll move through to public question time at agenda item number 8. 8.1, public questions on notice. We'll see that 8.1.1, Mr. Baines asked about Victoria's Cafe at the Albert Hall. We'll also see Ray Norman around York Park and executive qualifications. Moving to 8.2, this is public questions without notice. Now, noting that public question time, it's not a time for discussion or debate. There are the rules and regulations as we enter. They are available for you if you haven't seen, and you may ask a total of 3 questions each. Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Elizabeth Park was gifted to Launceston citizens by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth in perpetuity How will council reconcile this with giving this away to Stadium Tasmania, or is it a part of the York Park precinct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Baines. It is a part of the proposed transfer, and that has been much discussed around the council table, and the view is that working with Stadiums Tasmania, that Elizabeth Gardens would be enhanced, but it would be a part of that. And noting that today's agenda item, it is a live agenda item as well as we get further through when we discuss the transfer
I'm not
of the
quite
stadium.
sure of the answer. Does that actually mean you're still giving that away?
Yes, that is a part of the proposal.
How are you allowed to do that? It's in perpetuity. That means forever.
Sure. Well,
Not just while this council sits. It means forever, mate.
yes,
Mr. Mayor, forever.
That's a part of the discussion.
We will drop that one for a minute. We'll go a bit further with something else. Will council restore the circular car park adjacent to the Albert Hall when refurbishment has been completed?
Sure. So, Mr. Baines, that will be still car parking at the front there. It will look a little bit different, but there will be some reinstated car parking.
Thank you. Has any decision been made re the building once known as a kindergarten at 65 Frederick Street?
Sure. So we've been going through an extensive expressions of interest, and I believe that will be coming to council workshop either next week or it will at least be happening in February, where we discuss further those who have been successful in their applications for asking for more information.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Mr. Baines. Further questions without notice? No. Public. So just name and suburb, please.
I'm Jess. I'm here to ask 3 questions to my councillors. And I want to bring up something. Okay. I want to bring up the abhorrent systemic failures of the education and hospital systems and in all forms of government, which proves why checks and balances need to be taken extremely seriously. We need to look at the sexual predatory issues throughout government institutions, i.e. Ashley's, foster systems and other systems. And we need to loom closely and look at the results of the Commission of Inquiry and its recommendations handed down late last year. It is undeniable proof that society, especially where governments are involved, is failing our kids and our young people. I also want to configurate that it is extremely important for any mayor or any councillor to have a valid Working with Vulnerable People card. And it is important for any functional society and democracy that these checks are undertaken. If you are not able to have a Working with Vulnerable People card, you should not be on council. You should not be the mayor. You should not be in the limelight. And that is where I'm coming at. And I want to ask my councillors a question. Hands up if you have a valid Working with Vulnerable People card.
So just this isn't the opportunity to ask those sorts of questions. The questions without notice do come through the mayor, and I would expect that goes outside of the realm of what we're able to do in this time.
Well, that's not good enough, Mayor. And I think the public want to know who in this room has a valid Working with Vulnerable People card. We want to know our kids are being safe. There have been failures. I'm a person that has been molested by my own father. I've made this very clear to this council before. And my sister was also another victim. And it is very important, that I know that my councillors have a clean record and that they have a valid Working with Vulnerable People card. If you're a vulnerable person and you've been harmed and you've been damaged, you've got a right to know that your councillor is a safe person to be around. You have a right to know as a member of the community, and you have a right to know. It's not about, that you don't think my questions are valid enough, because they are valid enough.
I never suggested that your question was invalid. I'm just saying that under the meeting procedures and legislation, this is not a time or an opportunity for those.
I want to know what you're going to bring into place. You're the mayor. What are you going to do to listen to the recommendations handed down late last year and to bring them in and up to date the council policy?
Sure. Well, at the moment, that is sitting with the state government. They are looking into all of those recommendations. They are forming their own recommendations that they'll bring to the local government sector. We have, this council sat with the minister that is in charge of local government, and at that particular moment, it is not supported to require vulnerable working with children's or people cards as councillors. It's not supported by the state government or the legislation.
Well, it should be, because this is where our failures are coming from. This is where we're failing our kids, we're failing our young people. And that's all I want to say to you, that you're failing people by not implementing this. There has been huge outcries on this island for this to happen. Huge outcries. We've only got to look at what happened up the LGH, what happened at Ashley's, and huge breaches there of trust.
Thank you, Jess. Now, we do look to the recommendations that come, and we will work with the sector around those recommendations. So I appreciate you coming in. Thank you. Were there any further questions? Just your name and suburb, please.
Hello, Ros Lewis, Trevelyan. 2 years ago, a small group of us put in an application to the Premier's Fund for Children to modify a small playground in the northern suburbs to make it suitable for people with autism to be safe in that area. We got a lot of letters of support, including from the Mayor and from Autism Tasmania Variety Club, etc., etc. We also have a world expert on the subject, Caredwin Owen, at the university here. At the time, the council people in charge of playgrounds said that we should wait a year until the review of playgrounds came up. So that's probably the reason we didn't get funding. So it's been 2 years and we're in the middle of a process now. I appreciate the fact that I have an appointment with Ben Clark and Matt Jordan on Monday to share research and so on. I also believe there's now an inclusion officer at the council whom I haven't met yet. My question is a little bit more about the process from now on. What is the council doing to help the actual users, family, people who might have a bit of difficulty giving their opinions, to have input into the current planning process? Because I think this month is the last month that people can actually have input. One more thing I forgot to say, one little anecdote, and this comes from a parent here in Launceston saying she described playgrounds that she was able to take her children to in the state, but she said that all the ones in Launceston, she couldn't let them go running and improve their gross motor coordination and so on, because she couldn't let them away from hand length. She couldn't let go of their hands because there was water and it wasn't fenced, and that there are other playgrounds in Tasmania that are fenced off from water. And by the way, the one that I looked at was nowhere near the water. It doesn't have to have a pool. It could have water to play with. So there are many, many wonderful things we can do. And there are a lot of people who need this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to hearing how the meeting goes with Matt and Ben. So thank you. Any further public questions without notice? There being none, we will move through the agenda now to announcements by the Mayor at agenda item number 9. 9.1, you will find in the publication of the agenda the engagements there. Agenda item number 10, councillors' reports. We have some councillors' reports for today's meeting. There being none, we'll move forward to questions by councillor. At 11.1, councillors' questions on notice. 11.1.1, we had the question from Councillor Gibson around the Launceston Tennis Community and Event Centre. 11.1.2, which is Councillor Pentridge around the Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal and also the Gilmore Street flooding. Moving to councillors' questions without notice at 11.2. We have a few councillors here. Okay, I'll start with Councillor Kai, who's provided some additional information. So Councillor Kai, then Councillor Dawkins and Councillor Pentridge.
Thank you. Recently on the news, the macaque monkeys was on the loose in Scotland. It escaped from the park it was kept in, and as well as a query from a member of the Launceston community has led me to ask these questions and for an update about the health and safety of our city park macaque monkeys. We had a presentation in council workshop early last year, and we were informed about the many challenges and plans for them. What happens to unwanted newly born monkeys and how are they disposed of? How ethical is it in 2024 for the current management of the enclosed monkeys to remain as a visitor attraction in Launceston? No one could argue about the worth of the monkeys being brought here in building the relationship with Japan. There would not be any argument about how excited and informed thousands of children would have been in viewing the monkeys, nor can the commitment of the council and people in charge of their welfare be brought into question. However, my question is, what benefits is there for the monkeys to be kept in an enclosure and for their young needing to be disposed of to limit their population? An update about council's plans for their future would be appreciated so that I can relay these questions, reply to questions I have been asked about them recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. And noting that that report that the Taronga Zoo came down and did was extensively positive around the upkeep and the general energy and personalities of our monkeys and the implementation of a specific role to look after them. I will pass the message over to our acting CEO for some further clarification around some of the finer points.
Thank you.
So as you recall, so in terms of the monkeys' health and welfare, we engaged a zookeeper, so the first one in council's history, and they've been working through a program of improving the health and enrichment of the animals. In terms of the management of the numbers, so we don't manage the numbers at the moment, which is part of the challenge. The success rate of newborns is actually very low, but we don't remove them from the enclosure. We are working with Taronga and other zoos around a breeding management program and how we can manage that population into the future. And if you would like to go and visit the site with our zookeeper, more than happy to arrange that.
What about public? If the public wants to view, is that possible?
Typically not. So one thing we've initiated down there, and I can provide more information, is that there are times when the zookeeper's available to talk to the public. So there's certainly opportunities for the public to engage. I'm just not sure the details around that. I'll put that in the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Councillor Dawkins.
Loving the animal focus today. My question is around the National Desexing Network for Cats. In the past 2 weeks, King Island, Kentish, Latrobe and Devonport have all joined the National Desexing Network, which will be of great benefit to their communities. Has City of Launceston considered also joining that network?
Acting CEO.
So we've reached out to those councils and the Cradle Coast Authority to understand the process and how it's gone for them. So it's something we're investigating and we'll come back to councillors with.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Pentridge.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There's two points I want to make. Firstly, the questions I asked on notice, there was 2 questions. The responses I got were totally inadequate, and I will be bringing that back to the table at our next council meeting. And secondly, with all the decisions that we seem to be making today in relationship to York Park, I'm wondering whether someone can tell me, will we have a bigger crowd capacity at York Park after all this money and work and the transfer, or less? Because my understanding is that question has been asked numerous times of Stadiums Tasmania, by some reasonably influential people, and not reasonable, very influential people, and they can't get an answer. Now my colleagues here seem to have all the answers in relationship to Stadiums Tasmania. Right, now, will we have a bigger capacity in your park if it goes ahead for people, or less capacity? Someone could come back.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pentridge. I think that from the discussions that we had with James Avery from Stadiums Tasmania, the designs are in a preliminary state and they're not prepared to say more or less at the moment. And I think that's why everybody's getting a very similar answer, because they haven't confirmed through the accessibility that's required to bring the experience closer to the ground and also up into the stands and so forth. The words that I particularly kept hearing and resonated with was preliminary in their development and design. So I haven't heard either, and I think that would be the same response that we would get as we got from James last week.
Oh, well, all right, so be it. But I feel this is another time when the people, or working people of Launceston, who would love to go to the football, who traditionally stand around the fence, we once again deprived. And I would imagine they'll pay more to go into the stands than traditionally be able to stand around the ground with their friends, have a beer and enjoy the game. But anyway, I look forward to the answer coming back, because my understanding is that we're going to have more seats but less people. And this is yet another thing that we're not being told. No doubt once we've signed the paperwork, all the information will come flooding through. Thank you.
Any further questions without notice? Oh, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask, as current Chair of the Homelessness Advisory Committee, the Cultural Advisory Committee, the Cataract Gorge Committee, as well as being on numerous other committees, how the decision came about to put all committees into recess apart from those that are statutorily required by the Council, i.e. the Audit Panel, which I'm also on, and for what reason this happened. Is this something that's supported by any relevant sections of the Local Government Act? Because certainly the formation of committees is the decision of this table, not of any individual. And thirdly, it's suggested that a review is being done. What are the terms of reference for this review? Who is conducting it? And what involvement will councillors have in the process of that review?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. The initial process to go into recess came as an executive leadership recommendation, and there is no obligation for councils, there is no responsibility for councils to have committees. I've been working with Dion Lister as a part of the LGAT CEO, and he said that whilst it is very common and almost common practice in every council, there is no requirement, even though some legislation might pull in requirements like the audit panel. And in terms of how that recommendation came, it was due to comments that have been received from councillors, from the community, in terms of the people that are on those committees, as well as the officers, as to why that was put into place. In terms of parts of your other question, some of those committees have since recommenced. Some of them will commence shortly. Some of them will never commence again. The review part of it will be happening internally, and it will involve councillors' input. Councillors will have the opportunity at workshop to talk about their experiences. We've seen several examples of reports that haven't been able to be submitted because committees aren't hitting quorum. They aren't being able to do the duty. So I think a timely review is necessary and something that all councillors will be a part of. And that will be coming to workshop for all councillors to have that input into how more officially and more beneficially we can create these relationships in the community, because they are very important parts. But that's part of the review. And there's also some reviewing happening of internal works from Simmons and Wolfhagen.
So just to clarify, part of my question was there is provision in the Local Government Act that councillors form committees and are instigators of committees. I would presume that is also the case that councillors would be directly the ones involved if a committee was to be rescinded. So again, I ask, the decision then to put committees on pause, whose decision was that, and is that supported by the Local Government Act?
Well, I believe that the Local Government Act doesn't state that the committees are necessary. They're not legislated. So that's my understanding, even as of this morning, talking to the Local Government Association, that they're not required by law, but there are laws that bring in the requirement as in with the audit panel. So the decision came through a recommendation from the executive leadership team, and it's been implemented through myself and distributed to councillors.
Then I should put on notice a question, which is, if committees are formed by council and they're disbanded by council, why is it that committees can be put on pause but not by council? And I'll leave that on notice.
Sure, we can look into that.
That to be answered directly. Thank you.
No worries. Any further questions without notice? There being none, we will move forward to Community and Place Network at agenda item number 12. Now, this is 12.1, the homelessness statement of commitment. Now, there has been an amendment to the recommendation here as well. I don't believe there's anybody from the public to speak to the item today, so I will get to the recommendation, which is that Council approves the release of the homelessness statement of commitment, ECM doc set ID number 50236626, for a 4-week public consultation period. Somebody to move that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Walker. A second to Councillor Gibson. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't preempt the contents of the document in question, as it's not yet released, but I will start by congratulating council officers from CEO, acting CEO, down through our general managers, and especially in this case, Nindara Wheatley, who has been the prime author of this document. And I refer back to the time, and I have to just see exactly when it was, in April 2022, when I moved a motion regarding a homelessness action plan.
Here's what I found on the web.
In general. I also found this on the web, by the way. And that was for council to consider a notice of motion submitted by myself to identify council sites that are appropriate for the provision of access to basic facilities, identify any appropriate council-owned sites suitable for that provision, and provide preliminary estimates for costings for all opportunities identified, suggested amendments to the draft budget if required, to also directly engage in government service providers, police and charities via the establishment of a committee of council, which we have done, and which has been a huge success, I would say. It's been joined by all our service providers, I think, or if not almost, and certainly members of the homeless community, members of adjoining councils, representatives from state government members, the police, and the list does go on. And these are people who are all actively, as I'm sure all councillors here and all our staff who work so hard in this area are committed to finding solutions. I know the council already does a large amount of the lifting as far as monitoring, securing and protecting people who find themselves in a position where they do not have a home. That might be our cleansing teams, that might be our council officers who go out and visit people. That's all ranges of people within council, and I congratulate everyone involved in that. I think this document, when it is released, the public will see the council has worked through, together with those service providers and other government levels, a response which is appropriate and it's timely and relevant to the current experience that Launceston has, which of course I think we all know is not going to go away. It may not get worse, but it's certainly not going to get better in a hurry. And it may get worse, and we have to be ready for that. So that's what this document will provide the community an opportunity to see what our response is and to provide input into that. What I have said at the committee level and at the council level, and what reflects my initial motion that brought this to the table, is that I still believe that council can provide more material contribution towards the temporary provision of whatever services that are found to be lacking. And certainly in this document, it is reflected that council will continue to monitor the data and to find areas where there are gaps in service and to address that appropriately. But at this stage, in the middle of summer, I would like to think that before we reach the middle of the year, that council has found a way to significantly contribute to the material outcome of people who have not got a roof over their heads at the moment, for whatever reason. Of course, the solution is to have housing, to put a roof over their heads. And I would encourage all members around this table, and indeed the council in general, to keep emphasising to the state government that we need more housing directly, immediately in Launceston. Whether it be temporary, whether it be permanent, that's what we need. Because when the solutions come and all the work is done to work with the services and the people who are experiencing this, the one thing you need at the end of all that is a roof to put over someone's head. So I commend this to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Gibson is the seconder.
Thanks so much, and it's a real pleasure to follow Councillor Walker, who obviously has had a strong interest and advocacy role in this space whilst we've been on this journey. I think for me the statement of commitment really demonstrates the leadership role that the City of Launceston is taking in what is a very complicated, ever-changing and multi-stakeholder space. For us to pick up what traditionally has not been seen as a local government responsibility, to advocate, to provide dignity, to provide collaboration, to facilitate shared outcomes with the multitude of players in this space is something that we have really taken a leadership role in, and we should be proud of that. More so, we should be proud that this plan, this statement of commitment, has entirely been developed in-house. No consultants, lots of stakeholder engagement, but entirely in-house. And that's a credit to Nindara, to Linda, to Michelle, and to the team. It's also a credit to the multitude of stakeholders and representatives who make up the Homelessness Advisory Committee. The 23-page statement of commitment and the included 7 focus principles have been attached, Councillor Walker, as I'm sure you're aware, to the agenda item today. But today what we're doing is saying that due to the nature of it being so connected, so reliant upon our stakeholders and people themselves, who have experienced or currently experience homelessness or risk of homelessness, that it is appropriate to release this for public consultation to ensure that it's right. And I reckon that everything included in those 7 principles, those working areas, will resonate with the stakeholders who have been so active in the space and will resonate with others wanting to make improvements in this space. But I also say that we must be careful that we don't promise things that we can't solely achieve for our homelessness community. Let's please not overpromise. This relies on an ecosystem of interconnected stakeholders, other levels of government, in order that we can continue to advocate, provide, serve with dignity, and importantly strive towards prevention of homelessness. That's the work that I'm interested in us doing. I'm not interested in quick fixes that really have no long-term solution and in fact don't treat the core group that we're trying to work with dignity and with individuality as they deserve. So I want to say thank you for the work that's been undertaken. I want to reiterate that for council, for councillors, for staff, for the homelessness group, It is a journey. It's a process of learning and development. This is an ever-changing space. But I want to thank Nindara for the way that you've been able to include data, to include best practice, and to include very Launceston-centric examples and ways for working together in order to be part of the solution.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this really important topic today. I broke a mirror at my house this week, at least the wind did. I'm not taking any responsibility for it in case I get 7 years of bad luck. But underneath that was a segment of the Examiner from 1966. And I read it cover to cover. It was so interesting to me. I had, it was so brittle and it felt like my childhood. And in it were all of the same stories that we see today. The cost of electrical goods, people concerned about the bridge, concerned about the river. It really wasn't too different. It had those really gender stereotype ads that we'd all expect from a mid-century newspaper. But by and large, it was the same issues we face today, except for one glaring aspect, and that was homelessness. And that, I think, has been the biggest change in this city and this precinct, this area, in a very, very long time. I think this will be the first state election that will not be fought on jobs. It's always been jobs. 20 years of every election's jobs. This is going to be cost of living for the first time that I can remember. And that cost of living crisis feeds through into our current homelessness issue today. Of course it does. There are a lot of competing factors, but the social determinants of health and opportunity will show us that so many people today were teetering on that verge of homelessness, ended up without a roof over their head. And we're thinking about the visible homelessness. It's that hidden homelessness as well, which is the area that I work in my day job a good chunk of the time. People who are couch surfing, who are living with family, who are living in their cars, on their friends or family or council property, which is something that we see from time to time, with their animals, with their children, getting ready to go to school this week. There's been a lot of people getting ready to go to school this week with their kids in cars. Now, that's a huge change for this city. And whilst I absolutely agree that these 7 elements are the ones to be elucidated through this process, I do think that the data, and I really hope I'm wrong, but I think the data will show that we need to start providing more services to homelessness people. Notwithstanding the workshop that we just had, we know there are constraints. We know there are many constraints, but for me, this becomes a really high order priority over a whole lot of other cultural aspects of our life. Because if we've got one child getting ready to go to school in a car in Launceston, which we do, it's definitely one too many. So I applaud the work you're doing. I know you know all of this, and I really appreciate what the community will come back with this statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, and I stand to sort of applaud the work that's been done. I can sort of remember not that long ago, and it's probably only a matter of 18, 24 months ago, we were sitting here lamenting the fact that people were sleeping out on our doorsteps here and on the public buildings and the issues that was creating, but we didn't have any solutions. We didn't have people say, well, we're not trained to do this. It's not our job. We then had a storming of the parliament by a number of homeless people a year or two ago, which then sort of really, I think, hit home the issues and really took away from the fact that we as council couldn't just say it's a state government problem any longer and hope that it would go away. The issue hasn't gone away. The Homelessness Committee, and I thank Councillor Walker for the work he did to bring that to the council for us to consider, and what sort of transpired since then, I think has been a really, really positive thing in a very negative space that's occurred. I think we've moved head on and dealt with it, and Michelle, Linda, Nindara, you've done a fantastic job in sort of putting together and giving us some real leadership in regards to how we deal with it, because we deal with it with the public every day who don't understand. And I think one of the big things out of this is when this statement goes out for the public, that some of the public who may have issues with regards to what is or isn't being done in regard to homelessness, they may actually get a bit better understanding by reading this document, because I think it's a fantastic document. So I applaud that, and I applaud the the continuing steps forward that we're making in an area where a lot of people are making steps backwards. So I'm very pleased that we're putting this out for public content, for comment. The only comment, and I note there, and there's a comment about how we might then ultimately, by seeking images and stories and community about what the concept of home means, I'm just wary about that in regards to what that means, and if we're going to print formats and stuff like that with that sort of information in there, it's very sensitive. So whatever we do in regards to what we collect there, being very sensitive, which I know you will be, in regards to how we might deal with that as a council, because I think that's extremely important. But well done. I think steps so far, there's more steps in the road to take, and we all have different views on how maybe we can take those steps. But if we all continue to contribute our ideas, we'll continue to build on something which I think has been really something we as a council can be proud of.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Professor Raze.
Thank you. As a member of the Homelessness Advisory Committee, I'd also like to congratulate our staff for producing this and congratulate the City of Launceston. They have taken great strides over the last 1 to 2 years. As our Deputy Mayor was saying, it wasn't that long when we used to say it is a complex problem. It's not our problem. It is the whole community problem. It's a local government, state government, federal government, but we shouldn't forget also our community. And that's why I feel we should all work together to address the problem. Education is very essential and raise people awareness of the people suffering. And I think this proposal should identify so many issues that the City of Launceston are working on. And particularly, I was interested about the paragraph about prevention, because I think that's so important. Every year, the number of homeless people experiencing homelessness is increasing tremendously. And by looking at the causes of that, it's so important we can plan ahead rather than being overwhelmed by the extent of the problem. Just to give you an example how food insecurity is very linked to homelessness. And look, 2 years ago, it was estimated then by University of Launceston, Tasmania, 25% might experience food insecurity, like at some stage during the week. They might not have money to buy food. I'll tell you what, 2 years old, I think the problem even it's more enormous than that. And I think by getting some figures, then it will help us greatly in understanding the extent of the problem and how we should work together to alleviate the problem.
Thank you. Any further comments around the table? Councillor Walker to close.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors. These 7 principles that will guide our actions, changing the narrative, because society has changed. And that was duly noted through you, Chair, by Councillor Dawkins. This is a contemporary issue, not just for us, not just for the state, not just for the country, but for the world. Our society has changed, and council have to be on the front foot to continually let the public know what we are doing, how we are engaging, and acknowledging that it might have been the case once upon a time that there were boarding houses, or that you could stay with your grandmother, or that you could stay with other family or friends. That's become more difficult. We have become more insular in the way that we live. This is, not the only reason, of course. There are many, many reasons. But nonetheless, the public, I believe, just like the services and our council staff, stand ready to help. I think that if the council found the appropriate way to make material contributions to whatever needs there are, I truly believe that businesses and individuals will come forward and join us on that journey. And that, I think, is the next stage for our council, to not necessarily think that we have to do that alone, that services will come forward. The great work that is done that the public don't see within the council, but also the services are probably in a similar position. They're not necessarily singing their own praises in that regard. They just get on and do the work that needs to be done, and it's a huge amount of work. So I really thank them. And Dr. George Razzo, I apologise, Professor George Razzo, for not mentioning you earlier, but certainly on the committee, if through you, Chair, he lets me describe him as a little bit of a dreamer like myself, because I think we would like, like I'm sure all of us in an ideal world, to solve this problem. But it's not that type of problem. It's an ongoing state of affairs. It's not a problem. It's the situation that we are in. To describe it as a problem gives it that negative connotation. It's just the reality of where we're at. We need to accept that. And through that, changing the narrative, continually conversing with the public, we can build upon that. Engaging the community, facilitating cohesive services, which of course are there, but we're not to know if the problem or the situation gets worse. Certainly we all might hope that it will get better, but as an old Polish saying goes, hope can be the mother of stupidity sometimes. Just thinking that I hope this gets better is not enough. It's just not enough. We need to engage it. I would like to be the city, if I may have a short extension.
No extension for close, but I will.
Then I will finish by saying
finish.
I would like to be the city that the rest of the country look at and say, have you seen what Launceston's done? And that would be the goal that I think we should all aim towards.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Okay, so putting that one to the vote then. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda item number 13 is Infrastructure and Assets Network 13.1. We have some proposed new street names: Dogwood Crescent, Cassinia Street, Laramandra Street, and Paperbark Street. The recommendation is that Council approves the proposed names, as we'll find them at the corner there on Reservoir Road and Lilydale Road. No public speakers to the names. Do we have somebody to move? Councillor Harris. Seconder? Councillor Kai? Councillor Harris is the mover. Would you like to start by trying to pronounce some of those names?
I thought you did a very good job, Mayor. And yes, the 4 streets, Dogwood Crescent, Cassilinda Street, Lormanda Street and Paperbark Street. I think I'd rather live in the first 2 rather than the second 2. I used to live in Wilhelmina Avenue, and from a 7-year-old I could spell that because I thought no one ever spelt it correctly. And I'm sure some of the people there. But these are in fact names of trees and does continue the use of tree or native flora in that particular area being used for the name of the streets. So it has been suggested by the developer, and I see no reason why we shouldn't proceed with it, as there are no other streets or roads recorded in the statewide database being administered by the state government of those names.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kai is the seconder. Any further comments from around the table? Councillor Walker.
As always, it is excellent to see that there's no instances in the state of these names to avoid that confusion, and to add to that, if the developer would like to plant some of these native species, that might help to identify them even further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. No further comments? Nothing further to close? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 13.2, the proposed street name, Lamar Street. Now, we'll find this one. It's located between 368 and 360 St Leonard's Road. Somebody to move the recommendation to approve. Councillor Harris? Seconder? Councillor Kai? Councillor Harris.
Once again, this has been put forward by the developer, and in fact this is a contraction of his niece's first and middle names to honour her passing. So that's an interesting family connection to the road and street, and there are no examples of Lamar being used in any other street or road. This is a new subdivision I think we approved recently of St Leonard's Road. So happy that we move forward with this particular name.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kai is the seconder. Further comments around the table? Nothing to close? Okay, all of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Thanks, Michael. Organisational Services Network at item 14. 14.1 is a proposed lease to at the Birch Avenue Sports Ground. So the recommendation is that council lease an area of land at Birch Avenue Sports Ground to the Launceston Soccer and Sports Club Incorporated. Somebody to move the recommendation? Deputy Mayor? A seconder? Councillor Harris, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And look, I think this is just one of our ongoing renewal processes. I'm just hoping that the diagram that's shaded in blue isn't exactly where it's going to be leased, because we're going to be having a few people from 49 to 59 Birch Avenue that might be a little bit upset about that. So I presume that's just a general area, and I know it says in there to be defined by the CEO, but hopefully when we put this into the pictorial aspects of it, we'll actually define there, because I think we've got some Tasrail networks in there as well. So hopefully that will be constrained back to where the soccer grounds currently exist and the areas that they're currently utilising. But other than that, I think it's just a standard update of our lease ongoing for that small amount of money, just to cover our costs that we're charging them for.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Harris, anything further as the seconder?
Nothing further to add.
Anything from the table? Councillor Kai.
I have a question. I'm not sure if this is the right time to bring it up, but at the Birch Avenue soccer grounds, I've been, and same with Deputy Mayor, we've been contacted by one of the neighbours there with light flooding issues. So I'm wondering whether once we're signed over, whether that's the responsibility of council, or whether it will be the responsibility of the Launceston Soccer and Sports Club with the light flooding into the neighbour's kitchen issue. It's been going for a year or so. So I've been contacted again just very recently regarding getting this issue sorted. So, yeah.
General Manager Louise.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. It wouldn't be a matter for the tenant. In this instance, it will remain a matter for council to manage the issue, as we have been on an ongoing basis. We've engaged in lots of conversation and research to seek to address some of the concerns raised by that particular resident. So we are aware, and it is an ongoing issue, but it will be our issue, not a managed matter for the tenant in this instance.
I was reading here where it says to provide for the health, safety and welfare of the community. I'm hoping maybe if we can get that issue sorted sooner than later. Yeah.
We'll continue to work with the complainant around that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Any further comments? Councillor Pentridge?
In relationship to that, I'm a little bit surprised with the amount of work that we need to do. This could be another 10-year project. But really, it's a common issue with commercial sites next to residential, and all it requires is minimal expense, buy some blinds for them, and that'll fix the problem and keep our community happy.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. I do believe that that has been involved in some of the conversations around shutters and all sorts of different appropriate. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We can provide an update in the Councillor's Bulletin in coming weeks around the conversations that we're having with the complainant, so that everybody's aware of how we're seeking to progress the matter.
Thank you.
No, leave it.
Nothing further around the table? Deputy Mayor to close? Okay. All putting it to the vote, all those in favour? All councillors present, the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, 15 is Chief Executive Officer Network. 15.1. We have the transfer of York Park to Stadiums Tasmania. Now, this decision, it requires absolute majority in recommendation 3. And we do have an apology today, because we were going to have James Avery from Stadiums Tasmania here to speak to the item. Unfortunately, he's been otherwise engaged and wasn't able to make it up from Hobart. I would like to go through some of the recommendations here for the record as well. So the recommendation is that Council notes the intention that it formed on the 15th of December 2022 to transfer York Park and associated land and assets. In 2, consider each of the 3 objections appearing at attachment 1, 2 and 3. Number 3, by absolute majority, approves the transfer of York Park and associated land and assets. Noting at number 4 that the transfer of land pursuant to the recommendations will not occur until each of the following events has occurred. Where an appeal is made by an objector to the TASCAT tribunal to determine and the determination of such appeal, and a planning permit has been issued by the council in its capacity as the planning authority, and the exact dimensions of the land have been confirmed by way of final survey. 5, requests that the CEO determines the exact dimensions. 6, requests that the CEO offices to negotiate a term sheet with Stadiums Tasmania, which is consistent with the letter of intent received on the 2nd of February 2024 and which is attached to the report, which will require a further specific decision of council. Paraphrasing those, of course, but they are available to councillors and the public in the agenda. Somebody to move the recommendation. Deputy Mayor to move. A seconder. Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and I note that sort of December 2022, I think, was where we first formed an intent, and I appreciate a number of the people who are sitting around this table weren't there at that point in time. No, they were, actually. It was the first council meeting, I think, of the new council. And whilst I'm going to stand here and first of all start with a slightly glass half empty type view and saying, what happens if we say no today? And if we say no today, Launceston City Council continues to own and operate the property and will continue on into the future. It currently services 4 Hawthorn football games plus a practice game plus a number of other activities that come about. All of those which are supported by the state. And most major activities that are actually run through York Park are through auspices of the state government. When I was a lad, which is a couple of years ago, I played football at York Park, and I was a member of the East Launceston Football Club, who used to have the privilege of having some change rooms there, but never had the enjoyment of actually training on there. We were booted over onto Invermay Park to train. But having said that, it was a small football stadium which catered for a local football competition, the NTFA, largely. If it was still that today, I think the conversation we would be having would be different. Today, it's a multi-function facility which has had grandstands built, entertainment activities built within the substructure of the building. Somebody said, oh, why would we give away a $95 million asset? Think about why we have a $95 million asset, because it was funded through federal and state funding to build the infrastructure that we currently have. So arguably, the asset which may be worth $95 million and sits on our balance sheet at that level has actually been funded largely by the state. Somebody says it's a community asset. I would argue that beyond the ownership of the Launceston City Council and being owned by the Stadiums Tasmania as an auspice of the state government, it is still a community asset and very much a community asset. One of the things that I've stood very strong over my term as councillor here is the heavy lifting that Launceston City Council actually does for our region and the opportunities we create for all of our region, yet a very small rate-paying base actually contribute a significant amount of money towards running it. York Park or UTAS Stadium is one such asset that we provide it for the benefit of our broader community, and that's from the northwest coast right to the south, who come to visit our stadium, and we provide it there for them to use. The businesses of Launceston particularly probably benefit from that aspect of it as well, so I'm not saying there's no benefit to it. But at the end of the day, we've been doing the heavy lifting, and I think our officers have advised that it costs roughly operating costs around $3 million a year for that to be in the ownership of the Launceston City Council in operating expenses, and somewhere in the vicinity of $1 to $2 million a year in additional capital works that we need to do. We're about to spend, or somebody's about to spend, $130 million in interest in that state and federal government on York Park. What we also need to be aware is once that's spent, if you look at the lifetime of that asset, that's another 40 years, writing that off over a 40-year period is another $3.25 million a year of depreciation that we're going to be writing off on our balance sheet every year if it remains in there. So somewhere in the vicinity of $7 to $8 million is the ongoing cost to the Launceston ratepayers of holding and owning York Park. My argument is that we aren't a local football competition with the oval that it once was. We had the lovely trees around the back. You could plant your backsides in and watch the footy from there. We are now a big stadium which was designed to have big events. We have been relatively successful in doing that. And why have we been successful in doing that? Because we've lobbied state government to help us to get what we've got. I see no difference whether we own the property or Stadiums Tasmania owns the property as to us actually continuing to lobby for those events going into the future. But having said that, Stadiums Tasmania is a purpose-built, an organisation to actually run stadia in Tasmania, to actually promote and develop all of the stadia that they're going to be controlling to improve that, the usability of all of those stadia. We will be the first if we get this to happen. And as a consequence of that, I believe we'll have a head start because the $130 million and so forth like that. Yes, I would.
Extension as the mover. Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Britton.
So I see... Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just writing it down first, just making sure we've got the records. Britton. Putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour of the extension? Those against? That was 1 against. So Councillor Pentridge against. The 11 elected representatives for. The motion is carried.
We have, we've thrown in, because of the new stadium that's proposed to be built in Hobart, the north-south aspects, and all of a sudden they build the stadium and then we'll get no content in the north, I think has been one of the comments made. And I think somebody referred to me and said, look what happened to cricket. And we didn't even have a stadium that we gave away then. So if somebody decides they want to take something to Hobart, they'll take something to Hobart regardless. But my view is that with Stadiums Tasmania in charge of the events all across the state, they have a responsibility to actually make sure that the stadium is actually actively utilised. And if $130 million is being spent now on a $93 or $95 million asset, I can't understand how in any conscience that they would think that they could just ignore it and say that we won't do anything in the stadium in the northern Tasmania. And I would say we will still do what we've always done, is advocate for the things that we want to have and see in northern Tasmania. One of the things we learned on a trip to Victoria and Cardinia Park in particular is that Stadiums Tasmania, or Stadia there, Cardinia Park, before it was a more upbeat organisation, struggled to get any input into the national thing. So you actually have tiers of stadiums. This puts Tasmania and York Park into a different tier of stadium, which means they can talk at a different level from the point of view of what's going on and what can actually go to these stadiums. So I see nothing but many positives coming out of this particular decision if we make it to go forward with the transfer of the stadium. I see us still advocating in the normal ways that we will continue to do, and I would challenge any government to say we're going to take all the content out of Launceston and take it to Hobart, because they won't get re-elected in the next election. The political processes that go on in and around this state, and particularly in the north-south aspects, I think will never allow that to happen. So I will stand here to support this motion today.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the seconder, Councillor Harris. A question first.
If I may, is it a question to yourself or the CEO?
Through me.
Would you be able to quantify an increase in local Launceston rates just to pay for the depreciation of the increased value of the stadium if we were to still own the stadium after the $130 million has been spent on it in the next couple of years to increase its value?
Acting CEO.
So in terms of the $130 million spend, I'm going to say you would be looking at a 3 to 4% rate increase to fund that ongoing, and that doesn't consider the current deficits we're running.
I think we worked out 600,000 was about at one point.
Yep, thank you for that. And so I think that's very important, as my colleague, the Deputy Mayor, said, is that York Park, UTAS Stadium, has been on a journey. It is now very much a Tier 2 stadium and is really the stadium for Northern Tasmania, not just the residents of Launceston. Because what happens is it's only the residents of Launceston who will be paying the 3 or 4% increase in rates, not the residents of West Hamer or Northern Midlands or Meander Valley or Devonport or others. And so it's clear, which is why the previous CEO, Mr Michael Stretton, approached the Premier of the day, Peter Gutwin, to say this is really a community asset that needs to be owned by the state, because the state should be responsible for large community infrastructure in the same way that they are responsible for hospitals and other such things. Councils don't build hospitals. So I think it's really important that we understand that this is part of its progression, where no one's going to pick up the stadium and move it to Matt Point or Bellerive. The stadium will still be in Launceston. People will still travel to Launceston to see the content. The Act very clearly spells out, as the Deputy Mayor said, that they have an obligation to continue to provide high quality content for the stadium. And I guess it's just really important that when we enter into this relationship, much like a marriage, that sometimes you might want to have perhaps some prenuptial agreement. Not to say that the marriage is going to fail, but we need to be protected should things not work out as we had planned. And we're talking about the next 40, 50, 100 years. Because I've already said that Michael Stretton and Peter Gutwin, who have neither in the current roles, started this conversation. So we as a council, through what I believe will be called the term sheet, need to include some reference and relevance to guarantee should things change in the future, because the Act is quite implicit that Stadiums Tasmania need to do what is good for Stadiums Tasmania. And so there are probably three things that I'd like to see included in that term sheet. One is that there's no financial disadvantage to the current local users of the stadium, be it North Launceston, Old Launcestonians, the Mowbray Cricket Club. That is clearly spelt out in the Act, but I'd like to just see it in the terms of the term sheet when it comes back to us to vote on it. The second one is it does allow Stadiums Tasmania to potentially dispose of any of the stadiums in the future. Once again, I'd like to see that the City of Launceston, or whatever the City of Launceston might be in 50 years' time, it may be the City of Greater Launceston by then, has the option of first right of refusal to take back the ground if they are no longer going to use it for what it's intended. And the third one is, whilst we are the first, and we must be the first, because the other two stadia that are already in Stadiums Tasmania belong to the government, that is My State Arena in Glenorchy, and also the Silverdome. But there are others that are identified, such as Bellerive from Clarence Council, and also the Twin Oval development in the Central Coast as being part of Stadiums Tasmania. And so for us, if any future deal that other councils are able to negotiate improves beyond what we are getting in the deal, we also need to be increase that. So if, for example, Clarence were to ask for $30 million and be paid $30 million by Stadiums Tasmania to give up Bellerive, then that also must pass on to us. That guarantees that by being first, we aren't disadvantaged, but it also shows that we are committed to a stadium process and a state process of ownership through Stadiums Tasmania, because I believe it is the best and only option for us. Otherwise, Council cannot simply afford to hold it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Professor Raze.
Thank you. Well, I must confess, I have been in a dilemma. Through the whole processes of the last few months, I have been really concerned about some of the issues. regarding the total ownership. One of the reasons to transfer the ownership to Stadium Tasmania is to reduce the financial burden of the city of Launceston, which is about, well, the operational cost is $3 million. We don't have any guarantee if we transfer the ownership in the future that they are not going to come back to us and say, hey, we need the council to contribute to the cost of the stadium. From all the proposal we have given, I don't think we will have guarantee that we are not going to be asked to pay or contribute to that money. I must say that I'm not against change. I'm not against AFL development. I'm not against having professional board with a special skill to manage our stadiums around Tasmania. But do we have to pass the ownership of the stadium to the Tasmania Stadium, for example? Why do we have to lose our ownership? This is our power. This is our strength. How come, let's say, the Infamy Bowls Club, we own the facilities and we lease it to them to run it? Just an example for it. So that's my dilemma. Why? I am happy for the Stadium Tasmania to run it, but why do we need to give them the full ownership of that? It has been stated in the proposal as well that the stadium requires substantial future capital investment for the facilities and assets. And the city of Launceston is not in a position to make capital upgrade to the venue. I mean, look at the history of the stadium. The city of Launceston have been very successful for the size of us to apply major development of the stadium, and we have been upgrading over the years. Look at now, even now we have got $130 million investment. So I believe in the future we can still find some investment to upgrade it. It has been stated that the intention is to centralize ownership, management, and capital development of the state public stadium under a single entity with a whole state perspective. Well, I must express my concern that this model might not be the best model for Tasmania. It might be another big state, but I feel that North has been very successful in running the stadium, and you could see $3 million investment have achieved $30 million of economic benefit for the state. I believe if we turn, and what about the attendance to the stadium? We have been so successful in the North. We have 16,000 people attending in the North compared to 8,000 in the South. From a business point of view, it doesn't make sense to me. And I believe that, it might have negative impact on the North, because what stops Tasmania Stadium in the future to make the South, after big investment there, that they have to make decision to make the South work. We might have to pay the price for that. So they might have some preference regarding that. So we might have more game, they might have better game, downgrade our game. We might get less attendance to our, which will have a major economic impact to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Professor Raze. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the previous speakers. I was a bit concerned that I might be the first to stand to raise some doubt about this particular decision today. We don't need to make this decision today. That's the first point that I'll make. There's no urgency about this decision. We are not in possession of all the facts, let alone a guarantee. We're in possession of an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. And I note one of my previous speakers saying that, oh, a government would be foolish to take games away from the North. Well, governments have been foolish before. Governments have changed their mind. Governments have reneged on deals. It might be a future government, it might be a Labor government, it might be a Liberal government, it might be a minority government. We're not to know. So let's not put too much faith in the idea that this is going to be somehow set in stone or that it cannot be reversed, that a government would be mad to reverse this decision. Of course, Stadiums Tasmania have good intent. Of course, the government has good intent at the moment. That's fine. Let's see the guarantee. There is none. There's an MOU, and if you look at the MOU, it's a nice motherhood statement. It's a nice idea that this will continue into the future indefinitely, but things change. And I think we all know that, and we can all think of examples where that's happened. But let's go to a quick history about perhaps not going back to when one of my fellow councillors was playing football, but more recently when the whole area down there was given to the city of Launceston, not York Park. That has for a long time been a part of Launceston, but the surrounding areas, and given under the guise that it is to become a recreational area for the people of Launceston. And indeed, this was a vision before its time, in a way, and Launceston Council has invested heavily in that. Now, unfortunately, over the years, some of that land has been gone back to educational pursuits, so we have less land down there than ever before. And of course, if we're to get rid of this, some 19 hectares or so, we're going to have a lot less land down there in the future. And this is community space. This is an area where we have one of the last areas where we have the potential to have an impact on the inner city of Launceston, where we can provide, it could be accommodation. There are plenty of stadiums that have apartments right next to them. It could be certain other services, community services, facilities. Not everyone, if this stadium becomes part of Stadiums Tasmania, can afford to take their family to the footy. It's not cheap, and it won't get cheaper. But, there could be the provision of barbecue areas, a place to have a bit of kick, a big screen where you could watch the football, maybe an outdoor gym, a play area, all these sort of things. That won't happen in this case. There will be a fence going from Invermay Road over to Forster Street, or it's Churchill Park Drive there, and that does include Elizabeth Gardens, and I do thank the community member who brought that to our attention, that indeed Elizabeth Gardens, which again, we're giving an assurance that that won't change, but if needs must, things will change. There's no guarantee there for Launceston. This is a problem. And of course it has been loss-making. And then we hear the arguments, and it's nice how you hear people argue the negative in a positive way, somehow trying to negate the argument. But the reality is a lot of these numbers are ideas that are thrown out. Depreciation would cost this much. Well, of course, you don't know what kind of stadium is going to be built with the $130 million, which at present we have control over. So you're not to know the terms of that depreciation. That's something that we can control at the moment, but certainly not something that if we agree with this today, that we will have any more say in. And this is my greatest concern. This is one of those rare opportunities that Launceston has to strive ahead for our broader community, not just for people who can afford to pay to take their family or themselves to the footy. That's all great, but I'm talking about the broader community and the reason that this whole precinct is there. It was very much a community-based precinct, including York Park. It is becoming an elitist precinct, and that is being determined by AFL's necessity for certain facilities to be there for it to meet this Tier 2 status as a stadium goes. That won't get any cheaper for anyone to attend. And there'll be a fence that if you can't afford, you'll be outside. We've all been to those types of stadiums around the country. So, if I could have an extension, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Somebody to move? Councillor Britton. A seconder, Councillor Pentridge. All of those in favour of extended time? These all councillors present. The motion is carried.
I thank my fellow councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Unanimous.
So those depreciation figures, I mean, we can throw them around. The council has never really endeavoured to make an entrepreneurial go of York Park. We've always treated it, as we've seen it, as just one of our sporting facilities, not meant to make a profit. But of course, you can imagine down there having restaurants or cafes, having a gym, having things that could be incorporated into the area, having private accommodation, letting entrepreneurs build apartments right next to the stadium. There's definitely money to be made there for Launceston if we were committed to that path, but that hasn't been discussed. We're here to lead Launceston, not follow Hobart. This is a de facto vote today on the establishment of a stadium in Hobart. If we agree to this today, what we're saying by default is that we agree to the entire process of having an AFL stadium in Hobart, of course, worth slightly more than York Park will be worth. And consequently, there will be a huge need to justify that expense down south. And I don't think that any of you can comfortably think that that won't mean that any decision that is required in order to defend that position will be made. Just remember, Hobart Council is considering an alternative plan down there at the moment. They're supportive of an alternative idea down there. There are, many people, of course, who have questions about a $1 billion stadium down south. But this vote today is a tacit acceptance that that is an appropriate path. Now, I'm sure you can argue that's got nothing to do with it. That stadium may or may not be built, but it's an integral part of this entire plan. We have a state election perhaps in the wings. There are very many moving parts to this decision today, and I will reiterate, we do not need to make this decision today. 2 years ago, we were talking about forming a trust. A fellow councillor has just suggested perhaps we lease the venue to Stadiums Tasmania. There are very many more models that we could follow. And I appreciate the fiscal responsibility of my fellow councillors, and I share with them those concerns about the costs of running that stadium. But I do not believe that we have investigated all the possibilities by any means in regards to negating that, maybe not making a profit, but reducing that burden on Launceston. So I will leave it there. I do believe it's the People's Park, and I'd like to see, significant efforts on Launceston's behalf by Launceston to, if not maintain ownership and continue the venue as the people of Launceston's Park, then at least to garner guarantees before we hand over this significant asset to Stadiums Tasmania. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't add a lot more to what Councillor Walker has said, other than I agree with him 100%. The first comments I want to make, other than that Councillor Walker didn't bring up, is the deception and the secrecy about this whole concern. On one hand, we're told how it's all legit, and we've got nothing to worry about. We've got a letter here from our acting CEO, and he writes beautifully, or his staff do, and he talks about function 6 of the authority, which is a beautiful document. It brings tears to my eyes about all the things we're going to get. But why didn't we bring up the powers of the authority, section 7, which was the next one after 6, which starts off by saying to acquire, hold, dispose. Now, if we go through all this, there's numerous places here where it says to transfer any of its property. It says whether for value or consideration. Now, I won't go through all this because I was going to make this short. Right? But really, if there's nothing to hide, why don't we have it here in writing? Well, we do have it in writing, but my colleagues here, some of them, are going to, well, if they do, choose to ignore all this on some horrible stories. Like what I've heard today brings tears to my eyes, right? Launceston didn't instigate. The people of Launceston didn't come to this council and ask this council to dispose of its $3 million debt. All right? This whole thing was set up by the administration of this council, right? And those of us here that support the administration blindly are the ones that are supporting it, right? And I think it's pretty disappointing. And all I've heard is the justifications, right, for why they're supporting giving away something that belongs to Launceston, right? And we're giving it to a southern-based organisation, right? And it's not, I haven't got a problem if the state government was neutral, that represented all of us, but history shows that the state government has always favoured the city, the capital city that it's in. And this will be a sad day when this goes through. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide some clarity, as I see it, to what has been an ongoing conversation with regard to the stadium. In 2019, we engaged KPMG to look at a variety of different governance models that could potentially set up our stadium for future success. The 190-page document that we endorsed later on as a UTAS Future Directions Plan set out opportunities for this council to see what has been an iconic precinct since 1921 realise its full potential. In February of 2021, Council endorsed and sent to the public the UTAS Future Directions Plan. Some might remember at the time, the front page of the Examiner and the back page too, for a number of days, contained wonderful imagery and celebrated the success of what York Park, the stadium, could finally come to be should a different governance model or different governance models be fully explored. Importantly, that plan was endorsed by the elected representatives of the time of the council. The work then at sharing that document with governments of all persuasions was enacted by the CEO of the time, the mayor of the time, the mayor that followed, and no doubt the mayor that is in the chair now. That document and that desire for our council to fully realise the potential of the asset was what led to the government developing the concept, the legislation that is contained, as Councillor Pentridge references, in the Stadiums Act of 2022. And then the appointment of an independent authority to fully realise what Stadiums Tasmania could be. That being, as you've heard, 5 assets, 2 owned by the government, 3 owned by local government, and the potential of any new asset if a stadium was to be fully realised. It wasn't designed for the Hobart Stadium. It wasn't designed for the Hobart Tasmania team. It was designed out of the work that we undertook. That's where the legislation came from. That's where the conversation started, well before the Hobart Stadium was announced. Important to know that. Then, at our meeting, as has been referenced, on the 15th of December in 2022, Council then confirmed its intention to transfer the stadium site to Stadiums Tasmania. At that point, we determined, not by all councillors, but by majority, that that was the direction with which we were heading. A variety of things occurred following that decision in December of 2022, including a public consultation process. Now remember, the public consultation process informally actually started in 2021, February of 2021, when we launched the Future Directions Plan to the community. There was excitement, there was trepidation, there were former MLCs and members of parliament who had their own view, but overwhelmingly, the response to me was that this was exciting, that the opportunity for us to reduce the $5 million per year in operational and capital costs should be considered, but on the other hand, that the $30 million that came from AFL games, fixtures and the like was important. This decision today has absolutely nothing to do with the MOU that was signed with regard to the content. That conversation was a separate conversation and will eventually have nothing to do with Stadiums Tasmania. That's why we did it separately with the government, noting that we passed a copy to Stadiums Tasmania for their reference, because they're separate conversations. The skills-based board that makes up Stadiums Tasmania, as has been referenced also, is mandated by the legislation included in the...
We'll follow process though. Extension. Okay, Councillor Harris. And is the mover Councillor Britton as the seconder? Putting it to the vote, all of those in favour of the extension, that is all councillors present. The motion is carried.
Thank you, all councillors. Importantly, the skills-based boards are mandated to deliver on what it is that the legislation requires. And I think the attachment that is provided by Mr Malouf, the Chair of Stadiums Tasmania, CC to James Avery, sets out what they're going to do. It would be a foolish authority, a foolish commitment to their statewide duties to do anything other than what is set out in the legislation. But we have the opportunity to ensure that any of the ideas, any of the suggestions, any of the dreams, any of the wishes, any of the hurdles that have been put forward, we have the opportunity to at least have those considered as part of the term sheet. And that is why a decision today to further progress our intentions from 2021, our decision of council in 2022, this decision further sets us on the road that was intended when we considered, when we endorsed our UTAS Future Directions Plan in 2021. There are more processes to be undertaken. And for me, the final straw, the strength of the recommendation to us today is that the term sheet will require a further specific decision of council. Feed into the decision, into the term sheet, to ensure all the things that you want, all the things that are important, all the things that the people of Northern Tasmania expect are further exemplified in the term sheet, just as I committed to do with the content conversations with the state government, developing the MOU, because that's the only thing that we could do, given that the AFL is ultimately the decision maker with regard to the content. So you can stand there and you can say whatever you want, but as you look back, the intention formed by the elected representatives of the time in 2021 was to progress towards this decision. There is still a final opportunity in 2023, 2024 to ensure that the things that are demanded on by this council are included in the term sheet. They would have been arrived at even if that part of the recommendation wasn't included. And I hope councillors will fully realise what this stadium can be by being part of Stadiums Tasmania, by working collaboratively with Stadiums Tasmania into the future, all things that will be included in the term sheet, and I trust that the majority of councillors will support this today.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Further comments around the table? There being none, I look to Deputy Mayor as the mover to close.
Thank you, and thank you for the commentary from all parties, those for and those against. Again, thank you, Councillor Gibson, for your narrative there. I think it was a very good timeline and explains how we've got to the decision that we're being asked to make today. I'd still make the comment today, whether we own this property or we don't own this property, whatever will happen in regards to what the state and those people in the south are going to do to us. So from my perspective, that's an irrelevant conversation, to be honest, and I stand strong as a councillor of Launceston and the Northern Region to fight for whatever we can get from a Launceston perspective. And I think that will come through working with Stadiums Tasmania to ensure that the visions of Launceston and what we want for our stadium and broader remit are there for. I've seen nothing, heard nothing today that takes my view in a different direction to the one that I've held since 2021, that a releasing of the costs of this stadium to the state is something that's good, because I think it actually is going to be an improvement for what we can do, because I think what Stadiums Tasmania, which is a designed entity to actually promote sport and cultural activities and stadium activity, is something that we don't actually possess the skills for. Now, I'm not going to denigrate Robert Granawagen, who's done a fantastic job as a facility manager, and he himself would say it needs to elevate into another level himself. So from my perspective, I think we are doing the citizens of Launceston a service by endeavouring to improve the output that this stadium can do for us, and by moving into a specific entity which is designed to actually do that is something I think is a good step forward for us.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Putting the recommendation, or putting the motion to the vote now. All of those in favour? 8-4. Those against? 4. You're right with those, Kels, just to make sure you got the names. Okay, so against is Walker, Pentridge, Raze and Kai. I think you can work the rest out if that's okay. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. As we look to agenda item number 16 now, which is closed council. Thank you, Mr. Baines. So I need a recommendation to move into closed council to consider the following matters, which is confirmation of minutes. There is some gravel, sand and aggregates contracts to discuss, and then to close the session. Councillor Britton has moved the motion to move into, as we wait for our friends in the media to also head out, and Councillor Harris has moved to second. Thank you. I would have snuck them in then still. Okay, closed council moved by Councillor Britton, seconded by Councillor Harris. All of those in favour to move into closed council? That is all councillors present, just noting that Councillor Kai's popped out for a sec. Councillors, we can see up on the screen the table. So now that we're in open session, I need somebody to move that the table of contents is what we discussed in closed council. We have Councillor McMahon as the mover, seconded by Councillor Harris. All of those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Meeting closed at 2:46, with the next meeting on February 22nd here in Town Hall at 1 p.m.